regular board meeting of the Ross Valley Sanitary District to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Borstein,
Yes?
Gaffney,
Here.
Kelly,
Here.
Meggs, absent, Silla, here.
Pledge of allegiance, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to approve the agenda.
I move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good evening.
Open time for public to raise items not on agenda or for future agendas. Needed anyway. Anyone wishing to address the board of directors on matters within the district's jurisdiction but not on the posted agenda may do so. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. The board may not take action on or discuss items not on the agenda, but may briefly respond to statements or questions by a member of the public. The board president may refer any matter to staff for further follow-up or elect to have the matter placed on an agenda for a future meeting. Seeing no public, move on. HR committee.
The HR committee met on Monday.
Yep, we did.
Doug and I, we reviewed agenda items 7, 8, 9, and 12C of our agenda tonight, including the compensation and classification study, changing some salary ranges and changing some titles, is how I would summarize it. And we're going to receive some more information about the economic impact of that on the district if we were to pass it later from Felicia. Item number 8 was regarding the labor negotiations with ASCME, and they have ended. And we will be approving, presumably, the contract with the represented employees later on tonight. 12 meetings, 4 closed sessions, contract for 5 years. And agenda item 9 for tonight, the unrepresented employees, we'll be looking at a memorandum of understanding that basically puts the same provisions into place for the unrepresented employees, at least in terms of benefits that the represented employees have in their union contracts. So we had a good discussion about each of those items in detail, but we'll review them again here tonight. And then the HR activities for the month. Felicia spent a lot of time on the union contracts and labor negotiations. But it is time well spent, again, because now we have a 5-year contract, so we won't have to go back and do that for a while. And yeah, and just sort of another thing I remember out of the discussion was that it seems like morale is high, folks are happy. We're all on the same side. The labor negotiations went much more smoothly with the current business administrator, business manager, meaning the person who replaced legendary Felix on the union side. Doug, did you have anything you wanted to add to my?
No, I think you did very well. Again, what I said then, and I'll repeat tonight, is I want to congratulate the people who negotiated, but I also want to congratulate this board for having the right long-term outlook and working on a 5-year contract and working on some specific issues towards that 5-year contract. And I think this is better for everybody. We don't need to have this open up every 2 years. It's just better for everybody. In addition to the fact that we have a 5-year budget plan, and everything else seems to be falling into place. So I think we're in good shape. That's all I have.
The finance committee.
Okay, I'll
Go
start.
for it.
Michael and I met yesterday on the finance committee, and we reviewed consent calendar items C, D, E, and F. And the only thing that we brought up on C, which is the year-end financial statement, was that the maintenance, repair, and inspection expenditures, the salaries and benefits actual for 19 were almost 5.3 million, and for 18 were about 4.1 million. That's a big jump. And we were trying to figure out why was the jump so high. And there was a change in the accounting term. I think it added 40 hours onto the 19. There was, I think we capitalized some of the maintenance time. I think that happened then.
I think that was the year before, but.
Okay. Well, comparing it to 18 versus 19. And we had, I think there were some adjustments of retention and the OPEB.
That was
But,
the
you
meeting.
know, it isn't a salary increase, it's a series of items that cause that.
Well, we did make a payment of $200,000 to the OPEB.
And,
I
yeah,
saw that.
okay, that's another 200. Yeah. Everything else looked fine to us on the consent calendar. We reviewed items 7, 8, and 9, which are related to the classification, the memorandum of understanding between the represented employees and then the same for the non-represented. And we asked staff to bring us cost impact of those. And I think you probably did the same thing.
We did.
No, we heard that you did, so we knew that.
Okay.
No, we did earlier.
Foretold the future?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we did want to know, you know.
Yeah.
So we'll ask that
In
today.
philosophy, we definitely approve it, but we want to know the impact, because they looked at it. And then we, let's see. I guess that's it. Did we review the, well, we didn't review the SSMP information.
Well, we also looked at what Mark Hildebrand is working on. Oh, don't forget that.
Yeah.
Which we're not discussing today, but the finance committee looked at it.
The connection charge.
The connect capacity charge is what it's being called now, which is the industry standard. And we had some questions about that, about, is it, like for instance, we have generally 65-year-old pipes in the system, and they've been depreciated over a 50-year depreciation schedule, so on paper they're worth 0, but if they were worthless, they wouldn't be transmitting effluent to CMSA, so they have a value. And so the question is do we look at what the current value of the system is with depreciation, without depreciation? So we're having Mark relook at some of the ways that we can value the system, the replacement costs of the system, because things just looked a little out of whack. Tom said he looked at it right away and said, well, if it's $1.5 million a mile and we have 200 miles, it ought to be about a $300 million replacement system.
Minus some depreciation.
Minus a little bit of depreciation, but we were showing here 130 million replacement. And so we're going to look, he's going to go back and relook at that before it gets presented to us. But it was good to go over.
It was a preliminary draft, just some tables. So that's the finance committee.
Yeah, that's the finance committee. Central Marin Sanitation Agency.
I'll do that.
Doug?
Yeah. So, on sanitation, we came up with a few things to discuss. One of the first ones was we hired 3 employees to replace the prisoners at San Quentin to clean grates. And they'll also be doing work at Central Marin Sanitation. Their salaries are being paid for by San Quentin. But if you recall, our last employee decided to go home after work, which is really not something prisoners are supposed to be doing. And he didn't have a ride, so he absconded with somebody's car at the same time, which pretty much ended the prisoner work plan over there. So we have some part-time employees. We also decided we would pay our interns, college interns and some high school interns. And so we have some additional part-time employees. So is there anything we could do for them so they could put some money down in a retirement? They're not in any retirement plan at this time. And so one of the things we came up with was a PARS Trust, Alternative Retirement Plan, which allows them to get a little bit of money. It's not a lot. put into some account that they can then have it distributed if they leave, when they leave, because most of these part-time people are not going to stay on, and or move it into a 401k or a government pension plan if they become a full-time employee somewhere. There's some concern about that with some of the board members, particularly the representative from San Rafael. But I noted in the documents from the representative on behalf of the company offering to administer it, who came to the meeting. I forgot where he came from, but he's administering it for $64 a year. So the very fact that he showed up at the meeting, we already got our money's through. But I noticed in his document that one of his clients is San Rafael. So the San Rafael rep is going to go back and see what San Rafael's doing on this and then report back. So we push it on to the next meeting. We looked at new financial software and approved it. They haven't changed their financial software since I think it's 1982. It's DOS, and only a couple of people know how to use it. It doesn't interface with any of our other technology over there, so that's about time. We're looking forward to having that happen. We were going to accept a substantially complete Anderson Drive landslide repair, but then at the last minute we were asked to hold off on that as well, because there's some things left to do. And so we're not saying it's substantially complete, although I drive by that almost every day, and they have done a fine job. It's not quite done. There's some stuff, there's some cleanup, and there are a few things left to do. So we'll put that back on the next month agenda. We also looked at the CMSA fee ordinance provisions. There weren't a huge lot, do you recall? There were minor changes. We approved that. We also approved a recommendation to construct a new station motor control center and control panel upgrade at San Quentin. Again, paid for by San Quentin. So that's not really it. And that was about it. Anything else?
We, about 3 months ago, we were so pleased because we completed, after a whole bunch of years, the whole PG&E, Marin Clean Energy
Thank you.
interconnect for our cogen engine, and we actually produced enough electricity one day that we produced substantially more than the plant needed to run, and we actually pulled a switch and transmitted some energy, a little bit, to Marin Clean Energy, and everybody was so excited. And when Jason came in the next morning, I said, "Bad news, boss, the cogen engine just exploded." A bolt came off on the camshaft, and it went from 7,600 RPM to 0. That's not good. Newton didn't like that physics. And destroyed the engine. And so the board had a couple different options, but we opted to buy a used, brand new, refurbished, perfect engine in Ohio.
Aren't those different things?
Well, newly refurbished.
Used, brand new, refurbished.
Yeah. It looks gorgeous. Anyway, they brought it back to absolutely new specifications. One of our guys went out there and turned on the engine, and it ran. They watched it, they packed it up, they brought it back, and everything was just scheduled perfectly, so that, basically they drove it up, got it off with a forklift, and the guys were already there ready to go. The good news is we were paying about, bad news, $70,000 a month to PG&E during the time that was down. And as of last Thursday, we were back online. We are producing almost, they're not running it at full blast because they wanted to break it in a little bit, as you do with any new engine. But because it's been so hot, our electric consumption has been minimal. And we have actually been sending electricity back to the grid again. We're in clean energy, and that's really good news. And over the next probably month, we'll be cranking it up to an on-demand and being able to send all of our excess to Marin Clean Energy. So that's very exciting. And next Monday, in the spirit of utility cooperation, Marin Transit is going to be operating their transit buses out of that 2-acre piece of property. And they're paying CMSA a lease and covering all the costs of doing that, and that's very exciting also.
I'd add one thing, and I thank you for
Please.
reminding about the power generation. That new reconditioned used engine was our backup. We've already purchased a new one, which is going to be in place. New one's bigger, so now we'll have a bigger one and a brand newly refurbished backup generator, so we're set for energy creation for a long time.
The new generator won't be here until the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
No, a year 2021.
No.
No. They won't turn it on for a year from now. It's been pre-purchased now. It'll show up sometime next spring, and then it's going to take them that long to get the improvements to that room where the cogen engines go. So it'll be a year from now plus before they actually turn it on and start producing energy from it. That's okay, takes a long time. Next. CMSA calendar, ours. North Bay Watershed Association. And,
I was in Yellowstone, but you were there.
yeah, just real quick, the beginning of it, well, and Steve also came. The first part of it was talking about our strategic plan and reviewing it again and going over it. It's quite pleasant. And when we get copies of it, we'll produce them here. And then we had that meeting at the Napa Sanitary District, and that is some really quite extraordinary things, just very short. They used to have the Napa, if you're familiar where the big theaters are, up off, what's the road that goes across, I don't remember.
Imola or Sosa?
Yeah, Imola.
Imola.
Something like that. But the whole sanitary plant was up there, and although it was serving the city for their sanitation needs, it was not doing anything for taxes or anything like that. And they were approached by some developers who said, listen, we will build you a brand new state-of-the-art sanitary plant to your specifications off Selcall Road, which is just south of that, near the airport. And when we're completely done and have turned it over to you and it's up and running, we get the deed to your property up there, and we will take care of everything. So it was a plus for Napa San, who has a brand new state-of-the-art system with solar panels and Tesla batteries and a lot of other things. And it was great for the city of Napa because now they have a great revenue source from taxes from the theater and the gym and office buildings and restaurants. And so it was a real win-win for everybody. It was very pleasant. Steve and Jason were there also. Want to say anything?
Yeah, on this, I did attend, and on the strategic plan update, there was substantive reports on each of the 4 strategic plan areas. And so there is progress. The strategic plan was adopted in the beginning of the year, and on the first strategic plan element was to do one water in the North Bay. There was a report in July on how the North Bay watershed members are already cooperating. And we can actually give some examples. Even tonight I'll give some examples of what we're doing on One Water. Number 2, developing regional projects. There's information exchange embedded in the bi-monthly technical committee agenda, which I believe Director Meggs attends. So there's an ongoing coordination of potential regional projects. Number 3, funding sources. An interesting fact is in the latest round of Integrated Regional Water Management Program funding, the North Bay is proposed to have 28% of the Bay Area funds. That's not a bad percentage, considering we're competing against Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and the East Bay, Contra Costa County. To get 28% in the North Bay counties is non-trivial. And number 4, tell our story. There is a September 2020 conference being planned, and there's a new newsletter that Data Instincts is the company is putting together on behalf of North Bay Watershed, and the legislative tracking continues. So
there's some good updates there as far as strategic plan getting implemented. A comment I made is if we want to be one water, we need to get the cities and counties involved because they run the storm drain system and the flood control system. And so we see in our area the need to coordinate stormwater infrastructure with collection system infrastructure, and we're doing that. And that's the way we participate in One Water initiatives locally, Ross Valley Sanitary District. But having the town of San Anselmo, City of Larkspur, all our local governments that run the storm drain system plugged into North Bay Watershed Association is pretty important if we're going to have meaningful coordination and get them plugged in with their underfunded infrastructure alongside all the rest of this, sea level rise, etc. So we talked about that. At Napa Sand, very interesting to hear their program. We don't do a lot of water recycling here in CMSA area. Las Colinas does. There's circumstances why we can explain why that is. Napa Sand recycles 25% of their water. It's pretty notable. In Marin County, we recycle about 2% of our wastewater overall for the whole county. They use 100% of their biosolids. They put it on ranches and grow wheat, alfalfa, and that sort of thing. And we looked at their metrics. I just had our operation chief mix us look at these numbers I took down for their miles cleaned. And it's interesting. So, they had some impressive metrics on line maintenance, but it appears that we're tracking pretty well with them. Maybe in terms of percent of system, a little bit more than what they're doing.
Yes.
I can't quite do the unit conversion here, but it's good to benchmark ourselves with our peers. Friendly competition is good, and so I think I'll have Mixes look at this a little closer to see if they're cleaning 44% of their system, and then it went up to 57%. What would we say? And
we have a more strategic program where
Yeah.
we try not to clean pipe that does not need to be cleaned, and they're still wrapping up. I know the managers over there, and Jeff Tucker, and there's some really good people over there.
right, so their metrics is more percent of system. Well, if you're getting started, that makes sense. Where we're at, we're about 5 years ahead of them, and we're doing targeted cleaning. So we're not beating up pipe that's already clean. We're making it last longer by not over cleaning it. So that's a good story to tell. But we're real interested in their innovations, and their public outreach program has some things that we can learn from. So anyway, that's it for my report out on North Bay Watershed. It's nice to see that effort, multi-agency, multi-county effort, continue to blossom, and we can still make progress in terms of institutional participation.
Verbal report by board members and staff, and request for future items.
I'd say we had an issue with Broadmoor. Broadmoor went well, I think, in the long run. It was a huge project with a little confusion as to whether we were going to pave it curb to curb, which I think was the original plan. And then at the end, the contractor and the city of San Anselmo struggled with that, and San Anselmo would allow the curb to curb, which is in the residence, because that stretch of road was ripped up by PG&E and then put down. It was ripped up by MMWD, then put back down. Then it was ripped up by Ross Valley Sanitary and put back down, and they're looking for a little happiness. I thought we were going to have that happiness. Anyway, I spoke to Rachel from San Anselmo, the assistant town engineer, and they're going to slurry seal it, which will make it look curb to curb. Unfortunately, that's not coming up any time in the next few days, months. So I'm just trying to use my little friendship with town manager Dave Donnery to see if we can't move that up a little further than someday in the future. But the rest of the project went very well. It was an absolute unavoidable bombed out disaster because they're working on so much at the same time, both on Broadmoor and the 2 blocks that went. That was such an expensive project. But it's done, and when I looked at the metrics at the end of the report today, I saw that, again, our flow to CMSA went down a little bit, and I'm hoping in the wintertime, when it did not, it went back. right back up this winter above normal. I'm hoping we'll see some results in all of this work we're doing, but we keep hoping that. And this is going to be the winter we're going to find it's really going to happen. That's the only thing I have.
Anybody else?
Did you ask for agenda items
For which one?
in general, or?
Well, there were two
I mean,
requests.
requesting.
One was for the credit card expenses, and we have one of those, and
Okay.
Felicia is redoing the financial policies at this time, and as I mentioned, is going to bring it back to us hopefully next month as a whole group of them rather than just one. And we don't have a policy currently. The question was, on the last board meeting we had, Steve brought up that the CSDA had requested some help from all of their members on a state legislation having to do with what do we do with surplus property. Not we in particular, but special districts do with surplus property. And the CSDA lawyers and the CSDA lobbyists requested of all their people who subscribe to what they do, if we could send a letter, because they were working on it then. And so General Manager Moore wrote such a letter and ran it by Director Gaffney, who was president at that time, and sent it out. So the question is we don't have a policy exactly of what do we do when these kinds of things occur. And Director Miggs was interested in having a discussion about should we have such a policy, or is what we do sort of what everybody else does. And Felicia looked around and saw that the city of Novato has a policy that they use, and it is, that's what they do, it's what we did. So it appears to be what everybody does, and so the question is do we want to change it? Do we want to make a policy? And what
I
do we
think
want?
this came up in front of this board a bit last year in reference to our letter to Larkspur. So I think that's an interesting question. If you have a letter that needs to go out that quickly without board approval, because with all respect, the president of the board was not representing the board at the time. He couldn't. I remember, just as an example, when I was back on Park and Rec, and we were talking about detention basin, and somebody said artificial turf, and I said nobody on this board would ever support artificial turf, which, by the way, you can't use in a detention basin. The next day I got a call from the town attorney, the town mayor, the vice mayor, and the town manager, and two of my fellow members on Park and Rec saying, don't ever do that again. So I learned my lesson about this one a while ago, which is you don't represent the board unless you represent the board. Now, I'm perfectly fine with us having a policy where there's a last-minute letter of interest and request, but we can talk about that. I think you should put it on the agenda to talk about how we address that. And if we get to that point, because again, it's not on the agenda tonight, I might say something like, okay, but let us know, because we sent out a letter from this board taking a policy position, which I may agree with. I think everybody agreed with my point that we didn't want artificial turf. They just didn't agree that I had the right to say it without even asking them. So what position did we take?
For which?
Is this a discussion about having a future agenda item, or is this a
Yeah, I think that's what it's meant.
The lawyer in me, is
Yeah, so I would-
so we're
I would
on
put it on the
item
agenda.
number 5. So the question before us is this a request for a future agenda item? We're not-
As a board, do we think the agency needs a policy on what we do?
No,
No,
we're
no,
gonna put it on as
no.
an agenda item. That's
The only
sub-
question before you
Yeah.
is whether that should be on the, whether this should happen at another meeting.
Yes,
Whether
that's,
this discussion should happen.
yes, that's,
I
Not
would
on
move that-
whether there should be a policy, no. Your
No, I get it,
decision
yeah.
today is not, should we have a policy or not? Your
it
decision
should
is,
just be open for
should we
discussion.
have a discussion about it at a
Yes.
future meeting?
I think we should.
And Pam made the request at the last meeting, and
I'm
Doug
second.
appears to agree that it should be on a future agenda. It's up to the board as to whether you do that.
Board, do we have direction for staff?
Well, I think if two board members want something on the agenda, then we can put it on the agenda.
Okay.
I think we've demonstrated that it's due for discussion.
Okay. So moved. Anything else from staff?
Just to, I know I was a couple minutes late, so at the beginning of the meeting, the request for an agenda item was at that time, or is it now?
No,
I'm totally confused.
now.
It's now?
No, all we did was roll call and
Okay.
pledge of allegiance.
So, could we get an update on the Comcast thing? It's been a while, it's been 3 months. Yeah.
The building negotiation? Yeah.
It's not on
It's not on the agenda, but could we do that as a verbal report?
the agenda. Well, yeah.
Yeah, and the staff did that as a verbal report under this agenda item?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes, but I want to make sure all the board members, you've gone through all the board members, and I'll do a verbal GM report.
Yes.
The only thing I had one little thing. Michael and I attended CASA, and as usual, and the general manager attended CASA. And once again, it's just an extremely useful organization. And I thought one of the best sessions was on regulatory hot topics and things we can expect in the future. And I won't go over them, but we've got a group that reviews these things. And we also have the CASA attorneys meeting, which go over all the proposed legislation. And it's really the attorneys that know the most about wastewater in the state. And it's extremely valuable to us as members right of our business. And reviewing this legislation is extremely difficult. We need a bunch of attorneys thinking about it, and that's what we do with council. Yeah, thank you.
I just want to add a little tidbit. We used to pay a lobbyist $60,000 a year when I first started. Just to give you a little history.
We still have a lobbyist at CASA. And what's his name? He was at the end.
Well, we have a federal lobbyist and
Yeah.
a state lobbyist.
Yeah.
This was
Senator Christine is the
RVSD
federal,
Oh, an
and
RVSD lobbyist.
Yeah,
That was before my time.
and we don't have a lobbyist.
no,
That's
thank God.
ridiculous.
No.
Exciting news just on the CASA front. They, after exhaustive nationwide search, came up with a new vice president of CASA. The guy, what's his name? Jason Dow?
And the
Exhaustive search.
who's going to be president? Is it Bill from Nevada? So Nevada Sands board member is going to be president.
Marin rocks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next
Anything else?
So wait.
Indian
Yes.
Down there in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Board members all set. So I'll give a verbal report on different items. Let me piggyback on that latest comment. Yes, I did attend CASA as well. I was asked to be a judge for Capital Project of the Year and Innovation and Resiliency Award for the statewide awards. And so I participated on a panel of judges, looked at about 35 different projects for those two awards categories, and then they asked me to MC the awards ceremony at the luncheon. So I did that for CASA.
Wow.
And
They started a new tradition. There's going to be a drum roll.
So did RVSD win one of the awards?
no, well, let's see. But one of the judges was from CMSA too. Peter Kirstenmacher was on the judge panel, as well as San Francisco. So to your earlier point, Marin does rock in terms of setting the stage for who wins awards. But we, the winner of there were large and small categories, and so the winner of the Capital Project of the Year was Mountain View Sanitary District in Martinez. for a wastewater marsh enhancement for western pond turtles. So it was, the reason why that was, we highlighted that was this is a little bit outside of the mission, you know, the core work that a district like us does to actually enhance the habitat, but also for a sensitive species. And also recognizing that that was the first wastewater marsh in California. It predates Arcata Marsh. And so that was, you know, the judges agreed that way. And there were other good projects like East Bay Mud's rebuilding of their primary sedimentation tanks. It was actually an innovative in-house effort that was impressive. And there were many other examples, but that was one that won. And then on innovation and resiliency, there was a project where the effluent from Modesto and Turlock was reused, put into the Delta Mendota Canal, and given to a junior water rights holder, Del Puerto Irrigation District. A very innovative project, you know, to help with drought resiliency for areas near Patterson, California, because they ran out of water during the recent drought. And so using effluent and getting an NPDES permit to the Delta Mendota Canal first. You know, actually, and the Central Valley Water Board was part of that team of problem solvers to use ultimately treated wastewater for farm irrigation, you know, and effective and offsetting potable use, you know, offsetting rivers for that irrigation. So, at any rate, that was one of the winners too. So. It was good.
Sac Regional project too.
That's right. As part of a panel on new water, quote unquote, Sac Regional's project does something similar but on a larger scale. This is a larger treatment plant, Sacramento Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility, building a large pipeline to farming area south of Sacramento. And so it's part of that model that's, in our state, kind of pioneered in the Monterey area. They're a little farther ahead on using wastewater for agriculture, but now Central Valley has bigger scale availability, so they're going to pass them in terms of quantity. And of course, I have to mention that Israel recycles 80 to 85% of their wastewater, and it's all for agriculture. So we're still, you know, like I said, Napa does 25%. You know, we still have a ways to go. Marin County, 2%.
Room for growth.
So, and then let me then go to that part of my report, which is recycled water. When we got our program going to clean up Larkspur Landing, which I'll give you an update on, part of getting that started was we put in specifications that you could use recycled water. And by the way, you're encouraged to. Well, we learned about the permitting system here in southern Marin. It's a little more dated. It's more requirements, more hurdles that you have to get through to get approval than the rest of the state. It's an artifact of how the system was set up in the 80s. So we learned that as we went along. Pleased to let you know that as of September 12th, after working on this for about 4 or 5 months, we got recycled water for dust control at Larkspur Landing. So, and we also learned about ways we can improve our systems so we can make them more efficient. Along the way, we rediscovered our truck fill station at CMSA. It has gone dormant, so it's not being used. There aren't recycled water customers at CMSA. And so we began testing recycled water for sewer cleaning exercises starting on August 23rd, once we got through all the permitting. And that's going well, and Steve Mixes can give you any answer questions about operational. We're piloting it, and it seems to be going well. And other agencies in CMSA are looking at what we're doing and might start doing recycled water as well. So on 2 fronts, in the last month, we've initiated recycled water use in CMSA at RVSD. So it's going well. And there's lots of little stories about fittings and purple hoses, and I won't bore you with it. But we're figuring it out. And it's a good story. And we're going to work on the permitting program going forward to make it more easy to use. At Larkspur Landing cleanup, want to let you know that as of Friday, we had a master schedule meeting, and we, you know, as your representative, we concurred with the recommendation to make the cleanup a 2-season project. And it is to manage risk of wet weather and the issue of basically having rainwater accumulating in large excavation areas and just becoming impossible to compact soils and wet conditions and others. Now, why were we not able to get the whole project done by December? We ran into different conditions underground, in a nutshell. And about 20% of the delays that we've encountered are due to what I would call perched groundwater. Not necessarily the watershed water coming down into the site, but pockets of water that were substantial on the site that made the excavations wetter than expected, requiring engineering to create stability in subgrade, using geogrid and drain rock importing so that we can do compacted layers that meet specification. So there's more water than we anticipated. That was the number one reason. There are other reasons. We've had a lot more underground debris than predicted. And you can go out to the site today, you see these piles of big concrete rubble and pipe that weren't anticipated. I will say that the permitting with the city of Larkspur took longer than we thought it would. We got started about a month later than planned because of the permits for grading. And cultural resources might be as important as the perched groundwater. We have discovered Native American resources and are working cooperatively and productively with the local Native American tribes. So that's going well, but it takes time.
What resources?
There were redeposited midden and
It's subject to confidentiality, so he'll just say limited things.
but it was limited. It was limited, but important. And so we have an agreed upon procedure to protect those.
Yeah.
And we're working directly, and we have our consultant's done a great job. You might recall on a recent board agenda, we approved more than the general manager's contract amount for this additional consulting to help us facilitate work with the tribe. I'll say that was money extremely well spent. The relationship and cooperative approach working with them has been very productive. And it's a challenge, you know, when you're in a big site like that.
So, can I ask you, what does that mean, 2 seasons? So does that mean you're gonna button it up in November and pick it up in April?
Yes, and there's a good logic to this. I think we can declare victory that by the end of October, we'll have 2/3 of the site clean and all of the hazardous material removed. It's already all removed. The hazardous material is gone. It's in Nevada.
And been shipped away?
Shipped away and backfilled and approved by EPA.
Great.
And so, you know, another part of the good news is every confirmation sample that's been taken at the site has shown it is suitable for reuse. It meets cleanup standards. So we have not found any excursions or hidden pockets of contamination, and it's been thorough. So there's good news pretty much all around, I think, and there's a logic to, I think, from an engineering standpoint and risk management, there's areas near the soil wall and the wetlands that require shoring for the excavation, because you're up close to those features and you can't slope it back as you normally would, so you need to put in shoring walls, soldier pile, wood lagging, and there's a logic to, with the calendar approaching to October 15th is when, you know, we have wet conditions that you would predict, not to put those structures in, but to go ahead and do all of the non-shoring work, and that gets you 2/3 done in the November timeframe. Then pick that up again in May and do the more complex shoring work, excavation, and when there's less risk of wet weather impacts to those type of structures. And then you get, I think right now the rough estimate when we look at their predicted schedule is we would be completing cleanup by the beginning of August if we started in the beginning of May. So those are some rough timelines. You know, if we have a really dry April, we could get going sooner, but likely, you know, when the onset of the work happens will determine when the end is.
If all the contaminated material is out, why are we doing more digging?
What's that now?
if all the contaminated material is gone, why are we still digging?
Good question. There's really two categories of soils to be removed. There's the area that was near or at 50 milligram per kilogram PCBs, which is the toxic level under the Toxic Substance Cleanup Act. That created a smaller volume that had to be removed and treated as hazardous waste. The majority that didn't meet the cleanup goal, but was still above, what was about 0.21 milligram per kilogram PCB in soil. Anything below that amount is suitable to be left on site. So the vast majority of the material to be removed is between those two levels. And it's called non-hazardous soil, and it is being transported to a municipal landfill in Vacaville called Hay Road. So the vast majority is non-hazardous, and then the hazardous is a little part of it that had higher value.
But it still has some
PCB.
PCBs, yeah. And under TSCA, that federal act triggered this cleanup into a different level of cleanup, in terms of rigor and oversight and strictness to those type of levels. I will note from a budget standpoint, which we're very interested in, and you are as well, we have an $800,000 contingency in this contract. So the bid price for the work is $8,039,000, and the overall contract is $8.8 million, $8.839. We have only used a tiny fraction of that $800,000 contingency to date. The winterization costs that might take 5 days of work are well within that $800,000 contingency budget. So, well, it would easily cover that and other unforeseen conditions like the big pipes and concrete blocks that you can see at the site if you go by Larkspur Landing site. You can see them right there as you come in. So those type of contingencies will add up, but we're still well within the $800,000 budget for that. So any other questions on Larkspur Landing? I wanted to just make note of a couple things. On September 3rd to 5th, we participated in a multi-agency, how would you say, graveyard shift, or was it the swing shift? SD2, our partner agency in CMSA, had 3 faulty air release valves on their force main system, which is connected to our system. We provided a VACON truck and personnel. San Rafael Sanitation provided a sewer truck and personnel. CMSA provided personnel and support on pump stations. And of course, then there was SD2. So the 4 agencies worked and brought in Roto-Rooter and Roy's. And we had an army for 3 nights, September 3rd to 5th, because this was high-risk work to disable the air release valve, risking an overflow under pressure, and put in a full circle stainless steel clamp with a blind clamp so that a future air release valve, properly designed and maintained in the future, will be put back there. So we did that 3 nights in a row. All 3 were successful. 2 air release valves will be replaced by Cord Madera. But this was a great example of how we are a functionally consolidated agency now, today. We can pull together and get very difficult work done cooperatively. And so it hats off to everyone that worked overnight, and Newt Engineering and Pippin Cavagnaro, who was the field general and made it all happen. So good story, 'cause we may need to do something similar in terms of our air release valves that are hard to access. And one of the operational issues here is just to design these things in the mid-20th century. It has, the opening, the aperture, if you will, is only a couple inches, right? It coats up with grease, 2-inch aperture in a force main system. And so it's just not a good design for the long haul. And so the replacement ARVs are going to have the proper size aperture. What we learned was up to half, correct me if I'm wrong, up to half of the capacity of the force main was taken up by gas because of these faulty air release valves. So SD2 has been operating at half strength. We don't know how long, and as we look into our system, we may discover similar situations. So it's part of our infrastructure asset management plan is to prioritize these things. But what we learned through this experience is by working together, pooling our resources, we can take on and support our fellow agencies and deal with logistically challenging and, risky operations that are necessary though for, rectifying risk in the long run. So you take a little risk in the short run and you manage it in the long run. So it was a happy ending because we didn't have any big spills. Had we had big spills, you're out there trying to do the right thing, and people appreciate, that you're trying to do the right thing. So.
You did it in the middle of the night because that's when there's the least flow.
Excellent point. Yes, technically, exactly, where you're going to have the lowest risk of high pressure, because we don't have pressure meters on that force main. We don't know exactly what conditions are in that pipe, and so we plan to work in the night so that, also there's not a lot of traffic around. I mean, other considerations, but mainly
Low flow.
Low flow.
Yeah.
Low flow means low pressure. So good question. Yeah, right. And also, fortunately, there aren't a lot of houses near that force main. Right? I think there's some houses near ours.
We were making a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, to be continued, but just wanted to highlight that. And I was working on a GM bulletin story on that. Then finally, we put together a report to the Regional Water Board on July 30th called the Rehabilitation and Capital Improvement Compliance Report. A lot of words. This was required by the cease and desist order in the event that we didn't strictly meet provisions in the cease and desist order delivering specific projects by June 30th, 2019. Well, that date was looming, right? And, I'll just say on the side, we worked on getting Miracle Mile done.
Yep.
That was one of those projects.
Yeah.
That was on that list to be done by June 30th. So that one got under the wire, basically in progress at that date, so it counts. But some specific projects recommended in 2013, we've since done condition assessment and other activities and have other priorities, so we didn't do specific projects. So this 15-page report to the regional board that we worked on documented these changes and the justifications for them. But the punchline is, in 2013, we committed to $57.3 million worth of capital work by June 30, 2019. So 57, and we actually spent $83 million. Okay, so that's a nice number. In 2013, we said we were going to rehabilitate 29.3 miles of sewer by June 30, 2019. We actually rehabilitated almost exactly 50 miles.
That's a quarter of our budget.
Right? And that's all, put in tables and documented for their information. And then finally, that's a bit of a punchline, but I'd say importantly, this letter communicated your commitment by funding the infrastructure asset management plan. This board has made it clear you're committing to a risk-based, data-driven decision-making system for capital improvement program. And when you incorporate those principles, you're addressing the spirit and requirements of the cease and desist order and the general order for collection systems in the state. So you're anticipating updates that are going on right now to the general statewide order that focus on asset management. So by making that commitment, and what we said in this letter is that we want to engage in discussions about modifying or rescinding the cease and desist order as a result of the findings of the infrastructure asset management plan and the recommendations for the capital improvement program. That will be based on reducing sewer overflows and managing risk on places like creek crossing, or other places that have higher risk of public health impact. So we think we've set the stage for a fruitful discussion with the regulatory agencies based on that correspondence in July. Let folks know about that.
Very good. I'd like to, is that report on the website?
It's not, but I can certainly make it available. We refer to it in an item later on the agenda, the SSMP.
Anything else?
That was it for,
Comcast?
well, it's been a couple months, so I had a lot.
Comcast?
What
Share.
about Comcast? Yeah.
Oh, Comcast, yeah, you asked for that, and I said I would say something. And actually, Felicia, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, sure, I'll give you a break, because you've been going for a while. So the latest on Comcast is we're still negotiating the final lease agreement. We're really, really close. You know, we keep just making one step closer every time the draft lease goes back and forth. We've most recently prepared what they call BOMA measurement standards to measure the building so that we can identify exactly which part of the building is occupied by Comcast in terms of its square footage, so that we can, dial down that final lease amount, which part of the building is going to be identified, but used specifically by RVSD. So there's a square footage, a little bit of math that has to happen there, which is being professionally prepared by an architect. And he did a draft for us, I'd say a couple of weeks ago, and then just this morning, we actually did a walkthrough with the architect so that he could take some pictures and fine tune his measurements. We're going to be sending that information over to Comcast, and I suspect in the next iteration or two, we'll have a final lease agreement, which we'll recommend be reviewed by the ad hoc facility review committee of the board.
But that won't happen before the next tax bill is
Not likely, and in fact, I was just in touch with the tax assessor with Marin County and provided them with the appraisal of the building and some preliminary information about the lease, which they were interested in knowing about as well. So she's gonna be preparing the tax bill, the updated tax bill.
I don't think Comcast is serving themselves well, but it sounds good from our part.
Yes, I think we're in very good shape.
I have a question about, we're getting $48,000 a month. is
That's
that
right.
correct? And for IRS purposes, do we pay taxes on that because it's income, correct?
We don't actually, because as a governmental agency, we're not required to pay taxes on that.
Okay,
Yep,
thank you.
so it's free and clear. Money in the bank.
Here's what we're asking.
What was that number? I heard the other day that we paid down the building already.
Yeah, so we're down to about 12.5 if you take into consideration the $48,000 a month that we've been receiving in revenue. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, let's continue on. The consent calendar, matters listed under this item are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion. The consent calendar may include resolutions, therefore the motion, second, and vote will also be applicable to the resolutions and recorded accordingly. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a member of the board or the public prior to the time the board votes on the motion to adopt. Board?
I don't have anything to pull. I move to approve the consent calendar.
Anybody, hang on, anybody else?
Second.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I did.
Okay.
So move.
Second? Oh, okay. I didn't hear it.
I did, I said
Okay.
second.
Nope, I got it now.
Okay, we're all hard of hearing.
Do we need a roll call? Oh,
No.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Number 7, consideration of accepting the final classification and compensation study dated May 2019 and adopting resolution number 19-1563 approving new job classifications and compensation. Mr. Moore.
Very good. You'll recall that back in December of 2018, it's been a few months. We first brought some recommendations from a third-party consultant, Bryce Consulting, in reviewing the compensation of underrepresented employees of our district, which are about a third of the employees. About 2/3 are represented, just to give you a rough number. And so that's when we first introduced some of this information at the board in terms of the study of comparator agencies, 10 agencies that in November the board agreed would be used to set a market median, or to understand what the market median is for the different positions that work here at the agency. Comparator agencies are other wastewater utilities that are nearby in Marin County and nearby. And so at that time, and it turns out those 10 agencies were the same 10 agencies that were reviewed the last time the board reviewed compensation classification. So there's some consistency. So at that time, we saw that the unrepresented employees were roughly 10% below market median in terms of total compensation, salary and benefits. Since that time, we initiated the collective bargaining process with AFSCME section, or local 2167, and that initiated in the March time, early March. And as we touched on earlier, we did have 12 meetings with them, and we had the 4 closed sessions with the board to discuss the bargaining on that parallel process of the represented employees to the unrepresented employees. Around May of 2019, we had a final report, which is included in this item from Bryce Consulting, that has both the unrepresented and represented employee salary recommendations to reach the goal of being at the market median for salaries and benefits, total compensation. As a side note, you did approve manager contracts in January that were based on 8 of the 10 comparator agencies' market median values. We excluded East Bay Mud and Central Sand because they're much larger organizations from a management standpoint. But I'll remind folks that from the daily work of the collection system worker or the administrator in this agency are no different than those larger agencies like East Bay Mud and Central Sand. So it is appropriate to use them as a comparator agencies in terms of the daily work. But the managers is kind of different. So we acknowledge that and use a different metric back in January. There is one exception with the clerk of the board. We used 8 out of 10 for similar reasons in terms of the overall complexity of the organization at East Bay Mud and Central Sand. So I'll make that point. And so looking at the timeline, we didn't change the recommendations from May 2019 of the consultants because around that time, you'll recall, we were in discussions about a 5-year sewer service charge study and trying to do a 5-year agreement, labor agreement, and get this wrapped up in time for the beginning of the fiscal year. Our negotiations continued with the represented employees in AFSCME 2167. We weren't quite wrapped up at that time, so we made the decision and recommendation to not bring these recommendations before you until we had agreements and could do the unrepresented and represented at the same time. So that's why this is dated May 2019 and here it is in September. I'll just say that a couple of quick highlights on classification. We're really introducing a vertical component to the job classifications that wasn't really there until now, in terms of having designations of 1, 2, and senior, or in the engineering example, we have assistant, associate, and senior engineer classifications, and not just a single engineer classification, for instance. This creates opportunity for career advancement and gaining responsibility within the organization. And then also these classifications were designed and recommended from the third-party consultant based on industry standards for what we call different job titles and what those job descriptions consist of. So creating toward consistency with other wastewater utilities, I would say, with the classification package. On compensation, I touched on it. We were looking at not just salary, but total compensation, all different benefits, as defining what market median is, and then backing out salary recommendations by subtracting the existing Ross Valley set of benefits. And so that's where the salary numbers come from, is that looking at total compensation and backing out the salary number. And I talked about that in the staff report. We did have one change sheet. There was an error where we had included a previous table, because there's been a lot of iteration, and it's not a huge change. It's the one specific job classification salary recommendation for senior collection system worker that we had gone back and forth a little bit during our discussions. And so on the Appendix D, and what page is that? It's at the end of item 7, and this is not a big change, but we just had the wrong range. It's the second to last page of item, the last page of item 7 is attachment B, which is the proposed resolution. So if you just back up 2 pages, you're in Appendix D. There was the senior collection system worker was proposed to be range 51, not 52. And this was agreed to in our bargaining session. So we had included a table that was from July that we should have put in an August table. And that was our error. So I'm giving you the change sheet just so for the record, when you make a motion, it would include this additional change sheet. If you want to make a motion, you would adopt the staff recommendation, including the change sheet number 1. So that's a small change. It is a net result of a step lower salary range, but it turns out, anecdotally, there are no senior collection system workers in our agency. It isn't going to personally affect anyone.
But we anticipate there will be if people start stepping up.
That's right, stepping up, and we're creating this career opportunity within the collection system worker track to be able to become a senior based on the competitive process.
We don't have that.
But we don't have anybody in this position right now. That's just anecdotal. This doesn't help. This doesn't hurt anybody's current bottom line. So anyway, it's a small change, but I just want to draw your attention that we're being transparent. We also noted after the packet had gone out that 5 out of the 20 job descriptions were inadvertently omitted. They were the engineers and inspection superintendent.
Oh, no, give me these.
And so that was just for your information and to see what, the job descriptions now that we're going to go into our compendium of job classifications going forward if we should approve them. And I think that's all I have for the introduction of the item, and look forward to board discussion and questions. Board?
These items that we're looking at, the job descriptions, they've all been approved by the union at this point. So everything's been vetted, it's gone through.
And we've seen these.
And we've seen it.
Yes. That's correct.
So I believe this is the item that we sort of wanted to, so how much is this going to cost?
So good. There is, I should also place context around items 7, 8, and 9. 7 is the first step where you look at our proposal for classification and compensation before the fiscal year. So take yourself back to May of 2019. And so the first step is whether this proposal is something that you would support. And I believe we had a stepwise. Now, so to the very important question of cost, there's different levels, in terms of you can look at salary only or salary plus benefits. You have to, do you include the managers whose salaries were changed in January? Or, there are a lot of questions. So to give you an exact number, we can't do at this time. I'm going to give you some ranges and commit to, ultimately, as we change the budget based on this decision, if you should decide it, we will have a budget change proposal, or not a budget change,
Amendment.
a budget amendment mid-year that will also make other corrections that are appropriate, that we'll communicate to you at that time. So the ranges we're seeing, one example is salary, and it does not include the general manager. So the before is, and this is for the, just for classification compensation change.
I'm gonna make an edit to that actually, because
Okay.
I think that this,
Are you on this sheet? Is this what you're talking about right now?
No. No, I'm referring to a preliminary analysis. So I want to answer your question about what is it going to cost. I'm going to give you some numbers because it's a preliminary analysis.
yeah, so I'm just gonna jump in here for a bit. So what Steve is trying to say is that, so there's an impact to the budget for the classification study as we discussed at the HR meeting, HR committee meeting. There's also an impact to the budget as a result of the proposed MOU, right?
The next item.
The next item. And then there's an impact to the budget for the proposed unrepresented,
Yeah.
right? So we're breaking those down. So I would say for item 7, the impact to the budget is about $50,000. 60. Let's be safe and say 60.
So that's 60,000 for the first year.
Yes,
Okay.
for
That's
just
what
in
we
terms
have.
of classification.
Okay.
Yeah, modifications. And I would add on to that, I mean, if you wanted to look kind of granularly, you know, at the tables that, that were included in the appendices, D specifically, between existing and recommended, you know, I can tell you that per position, we would keep every employee, and you mentioned this at the HR committee, every employee at the exact same pay scale, except a little bit higher in the recommended pay. So in the case of, for example, I was just looking at the inspector classification series. For inspector step 1 in the old job classification, that pay range, that monthly salary is $7,611, and in the proposed, that salary is $7,698. So there's a difference of $80 per month for that classification.
Does that include wages?
That's
And all benefits?
That's just salary.
Just
Salary.
salary.
Just
What would
salary.
the benefits be too?
So the benefits are going to be discussed in the next items. So in item 8 and 9. Item 7 is just the classification, and that's just salary changes. So again, you know, Director Silla, to answer your earlier question about the HR committee, lump sum about $60,000.
But just for this step.
Just for this
How
step.
many employees is that, 5?
35 total.
35 total.
Clarification, not including contract staff.
Right.
34, I mean, 31 then.
That's
So
why
minus 4.
I keep losing track.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, you were still repeating the estimated cost on item 7.
Estimated cost on item 7
We haven't
is
done,
$60,000.
I realize 8 and 9 are coming up, but since we're asking that question, why don't we just get?
Jump ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. I wanted to make that one, because I was looking more closely at that, so.
Yeah, that's good. So remember that, so going back to the original analysis of trying to get to market median, a couple key numbers are total compensation at Ross Valley as an average, looking at all the classifications together, was 10% below market median, total compensation. And for salary, it was 8% below market median from comparator agencies, just all as a gross number. So it's not unreasonable that the overall cost of this package would approach 8% to 10%, or be between 5 and 10% increase in salary and benefits to the agency. And that is where we're at this point. When we look at these numbers, at the overall benefits and salaries, we're getting a number that is between 5 and 10% higher than the current salary and benefits. So that's the level of confidence I have right now in this range of numbers that are before me. And
I can give a swag number on that too. So if you add the COLA on top of the classification study, for all, and this would be for all 35 positions, you're talking about $150,000. $150,000.
Yeah, and so we looked at, in just strict salary, it was on the order of $250,000 before and after. And it was starting at 3.2 million, so 250,000 over 3.2 million is between 5 and 10%.
Okay, I got a question. You know, like our salaries and benefits in our budget for maintenance is 5.2 million. And for administration is 1.2 million. So that's called 6.4 million. And 10% of that would be 600,000. So I think it's 500,000. If it's 8% of salary, has the budget already included that number?
Where I was looking at the total personnel costs in our budget, not in the detailed budget, but in the pie chart. And that, so when we're referring to a percentage of total salary, we're actually looking at a $4.5 million number, which is wages and employer taxes. So our, but actually,
How much is it? 400 or something?
yeah, so just salaries for, that's last year's. Please hold. Salaries for 1920 is 4.3 million. And that's just salaries.
Okay, so 4.3.
And that's total, that's all
I
employees.
did benefits too. But 8% of that is 300,000. Not 150. Or does that include 60?
What was the, we were looking at a 3.5 number there, and what did that include?
This is straight compensation.
That's just for the 31
And
employees.
it
that's why.
doesn't include the GM.
It does not include the 4 contract employees. So sorry, Director Gaffney, we gave you a percentage of represented and unrepresented employees that doesn't include contract.
Okay, but that's 4.3 million?
3.5 million.
3.5 million.
And we were looking at a number that was between $150,000 and $200,000 in COLA for all employees, not including contract.
Is it 8% of that?
I can tell you in just a sec. It's actually 6%.
Is what?
Is the, it's.
150 over,
It's 188,000 over 3.288
Yeah.
million.
so it's 190K.
Yeah, and I apologize, our numbers are not as precise as they should be. We clearly have more work to do in this area.
Okay, and so that does number 8. And number 9, or item 9.
Are we on Zoom?
Well, we're just figuring out
We're
the
just-
number
yeah,
that
we're
Mary was asking about. We're gonna come back to
Okay.
8 and 9.
So the bottom,
You just gave us 8.
Yeah.
All right.
is that proper order?
You asked,
Yeah.
Kelly asked the bigger picture question
Right,
about
right.
all of it together, what is the impact? So it's not inappropriate to talk about the
Okay.
overall impact.
Just want to make sure.
So can you summarize all of that? I'm not the person who calculates 8% like Tom does. Dollars and impact on budget? And,
Yes.
I understand that it's within the realm of what we expect, given where we are in the market.
Yes, which I think was the general manager's
Right.
point that in the context of the classification and compensation study. I do have a breakdown of, again, proposed salary increases. And again, salary increases are first step based on classification change and next step based on the proposed COLA. And then we also have these additional benefit costs. Benefit costs are, they were broken up based on benefit type, not per agenda item, if you follow.
Right.
So, for example, the wellness program,
Wellness.
which was increased from, which is proposed to be increased from $300 to $500 per year. For 35 total employees would be $7,000 additional a year.
And not everybody does that.
Not everyone does that, no. In fact, I'd say probably about less than half, historically, at least since I've been here, take advantage of that. I know it's extraordinary. It is, you would think it would have a higher participation rate, but for some reason.
Can it be for any like gym membership or,
Yeah.
I remember reading, it can be for,
Yeah.
yeah.
And, I would say, just, my guess is that this first year, when people are gonna be reminded of it, there might be a higher participation rate, and then in subsequent years of the next, the next 4 of the 5 total years, it'll probably dwindle again. That's just sort of the nature, I think, of.
Yeah, as the smokers stopped smoking, because they participated in the smoking cessation.
Well, and it's funny, it's an active or passive, I think, effort.
Right.
If you have to actively submit a receipt and get a payment, you're less maybe likely to do that. I'm not sure, but that's probably it.
What about wellness for the board?
You're not well.
There was a food allowance proposed increase from $250 to $300 per year. That, of course, doesn't apply to all employees, but it does apply to at least 23 employees, making an increase of $1,150 per year. There was a proposed vacation accrual increase from 96 hours a year to 120 hours per year at year 3 instead of at year 5. So currently the district offers 120 hours of vacation at the 5th year of service. The proposal is to reduce the number of years service to 3, at which point you get 120 hours of vacation accrual. That isn't a direct cost to the district, but it is a liability on our books, and the total is $23,000.
Is that what both groups have?
Yeah, both groups are on the same
Have
vacation
the same vacation
accrual.
is why you're asking.
It was a request for the younger, the employees with less years of service to receive.
Yeah, that's a good request.
Yeah, it is, and
You
actually.
don't usually get that.
Well, interestingly enough, on the comparator agencies, we were on the low side at year 3 compared to our comparator agencies for years of, for vacation accruals. Medical insurance benefits, this specifically was impacting unrepresented employees. Represented employees were continuing to receive 100% medical insurance premium paid for by the district. Unrepresented employees were receiving 80% of their medical insurance premiums paid. The difference to the district for that benefit will be $37,600 a year. And lastly, the 457 deferred compensation plan, which, if the board remembers, for the represented employees was a trade between weekend pump station duty and the deferred compensation contribution. So it's kind of a wash in terms of those employees. For the unrepresented, it would be an additional, make sure I'm reading that right, yeah, $15,650 per year. So that's my summary, yes,
That's what that is.
and that's 373. Okay.
But what about pensions? Pensions are related to salary.
They are, and we don't have that calculation at this time. But there is a percentage of all of that pay that goes to the pension liability, absolutely.
So in response to your request for information, we put together a working table of those things that Assistant General Manager Newhouse went over, including the classification change and compensation change with COLA and subtracting the pump station number, 30,000, which is a trade-off between for the represented employees. We get $373,000 of impact. So if you put that 373,000, and this is a preliminary number, you put that against the combined budget of 4.3 million for salaries and 2.9 million for benefits and payroll tax. So compare that 373 number, 7,244,000. And it's like 5%. No, that's our rough guess. But we'll work through it. There were a lot of moving parts, and we haven't even gotten into that briefing on the item 8, because it had to do with wellness and vacation and all these things. Yeah.
All of those things, I feel like we're just, freshening up and bringing into parity between the represented and the unrepresented. So that's, I just want to know sort of like how much we're turning up the dial on salaries. And that's going to keep going up with the COLAs. And then pensions will rise to that same percentage, correct? Our pension liability will rise that same sum?
There's going to be something there.
And so then we think about the spreadsheets, that we put everything into to figure out our rates, and everything's going to jump a little bit too, in terms of our costs.
Remember we said.
Thank goodness we have that building and we're getting that rent from Comcast.
It's already spent.
Remember we said we were going to pay off
Plus,
our
we're
pension
down
liability.
to 12 years. Senior engineer at this point.
I want to take,
That is true.
Yes.
We're not paying a salary. or
President
benefits
Forsey
for
makes a
Kathy.
very good point in that we, our personnel vacancies in the technical services manager position and most recently in the engineering technician position, whose last day was today, we will have salary savings from those positions.
I'd like to still see the actuary numbers again after all of this is fleshed out, because I want to see what our pension liability is. I want to know, because we talked about a 12-year payoff.
Yeah.
And if it's not here 12 years, I want to know what it is. And
Can staff run that program, that info?
With a little effort.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, with a little effort.
Go invest.
Yeah, we don't use it all the time, but yeah, absolutely, it's built for us to use. That's why.
Let's have that.
What we
That's
said
another
was
meeting.
it's going to be 12 years, but we're going to review it after 6 because
Right.
all these things
Well, now
change.
we're going to do it after 60 days.
We didn't make it to the first year.
Pam has some questions.
All right, so I just want to be clear, are we approving also new job descriptions in this as well?
Yes.
Part of
Yes,
this?
that's the classification
Okay.
part, yeah.
So, I just wanted to know, because it seemed like on the, hold on, I gotta find it. It was kind of a template, I think it was on the interpersonal skills, that it only had like 2 key points, and I'm wondering if, looking, like serendipity, I got all the old ones. There was some weird communication we had, but anyway, I was wondering if we could add back a couple of the communication skills, because this seems like sort of pretty little.
Is this unrepresented or unrepresented?
It's on item 7.
I understand.
I don't know what's on 8. I don't know, they probably have the same thing, I would guess. I'd have to look. I can't remember off the top. They do. Hold on.
I would like to suggest that if it's for if the question is on represented employees.
Yeah, it's only,
And the union has approved these already, I would be very,
right, it's item 7, which is all, is this all unrepresentative?
It's actually everybody,
everybody.
yeah.
I-
So if there was a specific job description that you could point to, that would be helpful.
It's just the boilerplate on every single one in item 7 has the same thing for interpersonal skills. And I just thought it'd be nice to add a little bit more, suggest a little bit more information. So are you saying that that's a done deal and we're not able to do that?
It's not a done deal, because we haven't approved, we have to approve the MOU.
I think what President Borstein is suggesting is that, you know, the job classifications for represented positions have already been through the meet and confer
Right.
process.
I understand that.
Yeah,
Is this item 7 for both groups?
correct.
Okay. I didn't see that in the title, that's why I was asking. The other question I have is the manager have a new job classification? Because I couldn't find it, the last one was 2013.
And it's unchanged.
Why didn't we do it with the other?
It was not part of this
Management.
classification and compensation study.
Why not?
Well, that's a great question. Typically, the general manager contract is done on a separate track than the rest of your employees. So we did do other contract employees, but we did not do the general manager. Although there is data in the classification and compensation study for the general manager position. So when you do the,
It's gonna be 7 years since
Yeah,
we've done
and
one.
you
So
still
I
have
don't
opportunity.
understand, if we did these, why didn't we just do everybody?
Well,
We're
you
not
still-
doing everybody.
You still have the opportunity to do that because I think you're doing some activity on performance evaluation for the general manager. So if you wanted to make some recommended job classification changes at that time, you still need to do that.
When we do that every year,
Yeah,
Okay.
that's part of that process, and
that would be my
that's a
suggestion.
yearly thing
Okay.
with the general manager versus,
Yeah, that's at the board's
so
discretion.
we do it anyway. Is there anything else?
Any other questions from the board?
So are we, I just want to get a clarification here and kind of do a little bit of a polling. Are we moving ahead to go with what we don't have everything, we don't have all the numbers. If we vote on this, does that sort of sew it up to where we're kind of, we know some of the information, but we don't have all the information, and we're going to vote on it, and they're just going to fill in the blanks? I'm not clear on the vote. Maybe, because Doug, you made that statement about the actuary statement. So I just want to be really clear, what am I voting on?
Well, tonight is the accepting the final classification and compensation study dated May 2019, and approving the new job classifications and compensation, which is, we've been looking at since
But you said
May.
they're already approved.
I would say, Director Mack, that you're really approving a granular level of detail here. You're approving specific classifications and specific salary ranges for all of the employees of the district. And what staff still owes you is the total impact of the budget on that level of approval.
Okay, and when would we get that?
I was proposing to bring that mid-year in December, but I'd be happy to bring it sooner if that would please the board.
What you've told us is that the classification study is going to cost us about $60,000 a year
Correct.
in salary.
Yes.
And the call is 150K.
If you're not including the contract staff.
Okay, just want to get clear.
That's why we asked for it from us.
So,
Yes, it's not going to please the board. We need the information just a second.
What's that?
I don't think it's going to please the board. I
Oh,
think we just need the information nonetheless.
understood.
it helps us to make better decisions. So,
I missed the first part of that, sorry.
I said I don't think it's going to please us when we get those numbers.
Oh, I see, I got it. And, yeah, I mean, to Pam's question, if we approve this resolution tonight, we are locked into these salary ranges and to the raises in salary that Felicia has that you guys have already set up in effect. And have we already said to this board that you would ask for it to be retroactive
to a certain
To
point?
July 1.
That's the next item, that's item 8.
Okay.
Yeah, that's item 8.
But this sets up a new structure that will result in salary increases for 31 employees.
Correct.
Okay.
Nominal, in many cases, almost insignificant.
Right, and
Because
I
all we
understand.
did was make sure that there weren't any reductions in pay.
Right.
So in terms of the steps, there might even be a case where someone went from step 3 to step 2, but they have a salary that's at or above where they are now.
And we're setting up a structure that matches, that's similar to the structures that other agencies throughout the area have.
Yes.
And so we're bringing ourselves into alignment with the market.
And it's been reviewed and approved by the union.
Right.
Right.
And
yes.
negotiated.
Right.
Right. And this, we have steps currently, right? The whole steps and COLA, and that's not dramatically different in this.
No.
Okay. Yeah, and it's, I mean, when you divide that number, the increase in salary across 31 people, across 12 months, it's like hundreds of dollars.
It kind of averages 2,000 an employee.
2,000 an employee per year, yeah.
About.
And some will be more and some will be less. And the unrepresented classifications will actually see greater gains because of the compensation study
Right.
that
Which had them
indicated the
down.
unrepresented were below market considerably as compared to the represented staff who were just about at market.
Right. And this isn't in the I'm just saying this because I know this isn't in the budget as we adopted it.
Correct.
However, as we just mentioned, we're having some personnel savings at this moment, and so the budget amendment will not be wildly large.
I don't anticipate it to be.
No, and the budget anticipated a COLA
Yes, of 4%.
of 4%. And so we'll talk about it in the next item, but it's a little larger. But there was already an assumption because the CPI is 4%, and that's what this isn't a new, this is what the board had agreed to in the past. So the 4% was something that
Was cranked into the budget.
was cooked in, and so the additional amounts go on that. So it's not a huge budget change.
And I'm thinking actually back on my budget process, and I'm going to say I anticipated some of these classification changes as well, for the unrepresented staff in particular. Because, budgets are an estimate, right?
Flow, yeah, I know.
An anticipation of what the future year is going to hold. And I had, to make a determination in, April, May, and June, which way I thought the district was going to go in terms of this classification compensation study.
I have a question about COLA. Is this the right time to ask?
We'll talk about it in the
Okay.
on the next item, we'll get into it. And I'll recount the MOU items, which include the COLA, and the proposed approach in the next 5 years. But in this item, just to be clear, the proposal is based on the third-party classification compensation recommendations to approve new job classifications and compensation for all employees effective up till June 30th. I mean, it is only retro, in terms of that point in time, making the adjustments, and then it'll be, the next items talk about applying the COLA and the retroactive pay and benefit.
Yeah, I'd so move to accept the final classification compensation study dated May 2009 and to adopt resolution number 19-1563 approving the new job classifications and compensation.
I second it.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No nays? Oh,
I look forward to the numbers.
okay. Agenda item 8, consideration of adopting resolution 19-1564 approving a memorandum of understanding between Ross Valley Sanitary District and AFSCME Local 2167.
Very good. So related to the previous item, but in regard to the representative employees of the district, As we've talked about, we had several meetings, 12 in total, in addition to 4 closed session meetings with the board. And we have a summary of the key items in this updated memorandum of understanding proposed and before you today. I refer to the page 2 of the staff report. There are many components to updating the MOU that required a lot of discussion back and forth. Number one, this is a proposed 5-year agreement, which is in parallel to your 5-year sewer service charges. And the commitment going forward, you're looking at the both capital improvement plan. Now we've got salaries and benefits, looking ahead to some stability for both the board and the staff. The COLAs that have been negotiated are a modification of the current approach of the board, which is to increase, give a cost of living increase based on the San Francisco Bay Area Consumer Price Index, which comes out each April. And with a floor increase of 2.5% and a ceiling increase of 4%. So the way that translates is if the CPI is 4.5%, then it comes down to 4% for the COLA. And so this is the existing system the board uses. And if the CPI, if the economy's not doing well, it's only 1%. The staff still get a 2.5% cost of living increase. A novel approach, which we didn't necessarily see in other agencies, that came out of this discussion, and I want to give Assistant General Manager Newhouse the credit for coming up with this idea. Give him that credit. Was to meet the spirit of, not getting behind the economy or not getting too far ahead, which is what the CPI-based number does. We're a public agency. We want to be, in that middle zone, but not let our staff get behind. But recognizing a sentiment from the union side that maybe the last go around they didn't get as much as they thought they deserved, or that sort of thing. And recognizing the accomplishments of the organization and the commitment of our workers, put a CPI-based approach in the agreement, but have a 0.5 increase on top of that. That sends a message, that we value the workforce, but also we're still trying to rein in costs based on economic conditions. So that was favorably received, and in the end, a negotiated outcome for year 1 was the CPI plus 1%. Years 2, 3, and 4 are CPI plus 0.5%, and the 5th year CPI plus 1%. So this looks ahead 5 years, and it indicates that salaries will be slightly above CPI-based increases in 5 years. And then at that time, the board will consider a compensation study for the next 5 years. And if we are, and the adjustment will be according to those circumstances. And if you're way above market median, then you can make a decision to not increase as much at that time. But this doesn't send things out, too abruptly different than what economic indicators would suggest. So that's the compromise, that's the bargain outcome. And then we touched on, in a calculation of the financial impact of the package, we already touched on these other elements. The wellness program going from $300 a year to $500 a year. We're eliminating weekend pump station duty. We calculated that cost the district about $30,000 a year. We put that into deferred compensation or retirement savings for each represented employee. And the employee, and this is another novel aspect of the agreement, is there was great interest in the represented employees for retiree medical benefits. And through back and forth, we came to agreement that the board would continue to fund a basic retiree medical plan that currently exists, and that the cost to enhance that plan per the specifications of the represented employees would be borne 100% by those employees. And that way, not creating risk to the other post-employment benefit or OPEB liability of the district organization and ratepayer. And so this was a novel agreement. It requires work on the administrative staff's part in the next few months, but both weekend pump station duty, deferred compensation, and employee-funded enhanced retiree medical benefit plan will become effective January 1st, 2020. So it's not retroactive, but this gives us time to work with CalPERS and set up this new program. The unrepresented, this is getting ahead of, sort of into item 9, but I'll just make the note that the unrepresented employees of the district will have the opportunity to participate in this enhanced retiree medical benefit program. It's a one-time irrevocable decision. If they don't, then they can't get back into it. But to make the program financially solvent, we believe we have to require all new unrepresented employees to participate in the program as a condition of employment, same as a representative who don't have a choice. So I hope that's clear. But and I'll let you discuss that and the policy implications of that. Classification changes we've talked about with the job classifications, and you adopted them. Salary schedule, standby duty and pay, there was some making equivalent to secondary and primary standby duty pay right now. Currently it was inequitable, making it equal some nominal cost of the district on the order of $7,000 a year or something like that. Fatigue time has to do with when workers work extended hours, say in the nighttime, and then the necessary 8-hour rest time between shifts overlaps with the next normal shift work day. And then the worker feels penalized for not getting to claim those hours because they've done the right thing and worked extra time for the district. And so this is a way of rectifying that, in terms of allowing them to still get regular shift pay even though they worked long hours the night before. So it's called fatigue time. Vacation accrual we touched on. The only change is just shifting to 120 hours of 3 years instead of 5 years. Food allowance we talked about. And then finally, this is not a small task and not a small achievement. Walking line by line through the MOU from the last round and really cleaning up unintended consequences of certain language, vague language, and it was a very productive way for us to get together and have a common adversary, which was a vague MOU. So we worked through that team agreement on language and the team building exercise. And again, Felicia was really helpful in spearheading that. And we did receive some outside advice on that too. It was reviewed by LCW, our HR attorney, and we got some good advice on that. So we believe this MOU is a state-of-the-art MOU, where we did not have that coming in, but we're very proud of this accomplishment, and we thank John Vogel's here, so I'm going to thank him as part of the bargaining group, and in terms of really attention to excellence on this document and trying to avoid the unintended consequences of vaguely stated agreements. So I guess there's a lot of time I took, but just wanted to walk you through some of the dynamics and the human aspects of the bargaining process, and we're pleased to bring this proposal before you today.
Board member on the left is chomping at the bit, ready to go.
Well, I was thinking this is the result of lots of negotiation, a lot of coordination between our staff and the union and our administration. We've seen pretty much reviewed the summary before.
Yep.
And
We had to.
Talked about it in closed session
And
multiple
what could
times.
we do,
Yeah.
And, I don't think we have any choice but to pass this.
Well, I wouldn't say it that way. I would say this is what we negotiate.
This is
And
what
we're very happy
We're very pleased
about
with
the
it.
result.
Yeah, and we're very happy about the results because this is what we negotiate.
this is state of the art.
I wanted to say, since we're not in closed
I just
session,
like
the whole idea of doing a 5-year deal is great. This is important, as I said that earlier in the meeting. I think this is good for the representative, I think it's good for the district, I think it's good for the ratepayers. And we had many meetings in closed session about this very topic.
Am I right?
Question, about the COLA. So they're projecting 2.8 for this year. Does that matter on this at all, MOU?
I was just gonna jump in. So the MOU language is based on April to April CPI, If in year 2, the CPI is you said, maybe 2.8, is that what you said? Then the increase to the employees would be 2.8 plus 0.5% or 3.3% increase in
Okay,
salaries.
with the ceiling, okay. And I forgot, why did we give them 5% the first year?
We uploaded it at the beginning.
Is this like a
They asked
offer you can't
Yes.
refuse?
They asked for it.
Yeah, exactly what it was.
Okay. I have nothing else to say. I'm good.
I'd like to make a motion on this. So I would move to adopt Resolution 19-1564, approving a memorandum of understanding
Yeah, there's a
between...
change sheet on this, isn't there?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I
Our
forgot to
apologies.
mention, this change sheet on this item is also, has the same change, I believe.
Which reminds me, did we say that in our motion?
Like the same changes earlier.
Yeah.
It's similar, but obviously with the CPI included.
Right.
Right,
Okay. So I now have it.
yes.
Can I go back?
Can you give it back? So that you
No,
have-
can I go back to my motion?
Oh, yes.
No, I mean, this is, you wanted to make sure I had this.
I wanted to make sure you had
I
that.
appreciate
Yes,
that.
as part of the motion.
I'd still move to adopt Resolution 19-1564, approving a memorandum of understanding between the Ross Valley Sanitary District and, how am I going to pronounce that?
Ask me.
Yes.
ASME, Local 2167, and its members.
With change.
Which the change
What change?
includes.
It's a similar changes to what the board was shown in the,
It's one classification.
it's one classification and then it's the CPI adjustment for that classification, as well as approving classification.
Right,
Oh, yeah, okay.
right, same one.
Yes, because it went from 51 to
All second the motion.
5%.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In favor? So, it's unanimous. Number 9.
No, that's not right. What the heck did I do?
Consideration of adopting resolution number 19-1565, approving salary and benefit schedules for unrepresented employees of the district.
All of our previous motions are pending clarification from staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, you know, we've reported this as the range 51 for senior collection system worker.
Yes, please.
Okay, so change sheet number 1 is supposed to have range 51 for senior collection system.
Correct.
I believe that change sheet still had the typographic error in
It did.
it. Okay, just for the record, so you know, full disclosure. And
You'll email it to us.
we'll seek to clarify for the record the final package, includes range 51 for the senior collection system. And which range for the engineering technician?
Hold, please hold. I have 50.
So.
Change sheet number 1 says 51. With the highlights? Okay.
Okay, 49.
But it should be, it's supposed to be mid-range between the operations supervisor,
So why did the range change?
because I've added 5% to them for this into COLA.
Okay, then it's probably.
So 60, 56, 5.2,
Okay.
51, 3, and 54, that's correct, 46 and 40. So this is correct.
Yeah, so I didn't look at the modified.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not a
Right,
problem.
got it.
Not a problem. We're good. the range, so the change sheet was accurate. The ranges, numbers changed with the COLA. I didn't understand.
Number 9,
Number 9.
consideration of adopting resolution number 19-1565, approving salary and benefit schedules for unrepresented employees of the district.
Yes, I'll just introduce this and feel free to add anything because you put this together. But this package then is a complement to the previous item 8 for unrepresented employees. Now, different than the represented, each year this resolution needs to be reviewed by the board. It's not a 5-year agreement for unrepresented. And so the recommendations in this resolution and staff report are consistent with the discussions we've just had in terms of providing the same or similar benefits as the represented employees and the recommendations of the classification and compensation study as applies to unrepresented employees. And the same COLA as CPI plus 1%.
So basically, this is the same thing for unrepresented and for represented again. Why do we not use an MOU? There used to be one, I think.
Unrepresented employees are typically not employees by contract. An MOU is a type of contract. So we've been advised by our employment team that it's best to not have a contractual document for those unrepresented employees. It's better to just have a resolution. Yeah.
Well, I agree with the philosophy that, we treat all of our employees essentially the same.
I mean, they're at-will employees under California law. This is just saying how we're going to treat them, which I think is a nice thing. But when we got into a situation where it was an MOU, there was some implication, this was long before most people were here, that we then owed it to them contractually to keep them in lockstep.
Actually, we were here then.
You were?
Yeah.
Okay, when Wendy was here? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. The staff wasn't, except for you guys.
I'm willing to make a motion.
Go for it. If we have no further comments.
Okay, so we're basing a 5%, 1%, and all similar COLA for 5 years. We're doing the same thing with the unrepresented, right?
Almost, except you're only doing it for 1 year.
And all the following 4 years, we're gonna come back every year.
Correct. For unrepresented only.
I just wanna be clear, didn't we did some of this last year, right? We
Yes.
gave like a big
Yes.
jump for the unrepresented, it's quite a bit of money. from what I remember.
Well, we eliminated what they call the terms and conditions document, and we transferred all of the content from the terms and conditions document to the personnel policy and the salary and benefits resolution.
So I just want to be clear, so last year, I thought we had caught up, because we reviewed the compensation study at that time.
For management employees
Right,
only.
right. So I don't understand why we're coming back to do this again.
This is unrepresented employees, not management employees.
Okay, good.
So, for example, the administrative coordinators in the district, the now business systems analyst position in the district, the accounting and finance supervisor positions of the district, those are non-management, unrepresented positions.
Engineer.
5 of them.
There's 8, yeah.
I guess I think I need a review because things have changed quite a bit in the last year with how you're changing employee status for representative, and it's just getting a little
I'd be happy to go
hard
with
for
that.
me to kind of keep up,
Yeah,
figure out.
happy to go through that, no problem.
And I'm curious, so because you're not union, you want to come back every year and grant a raise?
Yes.
And is that based, see, we don't have an incentive-based program because we're a public agency, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the salary and benefits resolution would come back to the board at the same time as the budget. So you'd be looking at any increases to salary or benefits annually for unrepresented staff as part of your budget process. That's the concept.
But, yeah, to put a crystal ball on it, we're likely to recommend the same for unrepresented as for represented.
Well, that's why I was questioning why didn't you go for the 5-year? You didn't go for
Because the
5
employment, we've been advised that it's better to not have a contractual agreement with
Because it
non-bargaining.
implies a long-term.
It applies to a contract,
Yes.
and they don't have a contract.
Yeah.
They are
Yeah, we're
real
doing it.
employees.
If you don't have a contract, you can't have a
Kinda,
contractual document.
Kinda.
It's a fine point.
Yeah,
but
it is a
it's-
fine point, because saying you're gonna come back every year could be contractual as well, so, in a way. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll move. I would like to move that we adopt resolution 19-1565, approving salary and benefit schedules for unrepresented employees of the district.
Second?
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Against? None? There we go. Item 10.
And no change sheets on that one.
No
Thank you.
change.
So far.
Hey.
Consideration of approving the revised Ross Valley Sanitary District 2019 Sewer System Management Plan, SSMP.
All right, Steve, no, just be ready. I'm just looking back at Steve Bentley because he helped put this together. He was really the driving force. A few months ago, I can't remember exactly the month, I think it was February or March, you approved a contract with Doug Humphrey, or Humphrey Consulting, to assist us in updating the district sewer system management plan. Sewer system management plans are required under the statewide sanitary sewer systems waste discharge requirement permit, the general statewide permit for discharges from collection systems. And it's really a regulation of sewer system overflows, or SSOs. And recognizing that these discharges occur from at the time, a couple of years ago, there were 1,097 enrollees in the statewide permit. So there are a lot of systems out there. We're just one of those. Each system must submit an SSMP. It isn't for review and approval by the regulatory team, in this case the Regional Water Quality Control Board, but you're supposed to have one on hand and available for review. The purpose of this requirement in the statewide permit is just to show a systematic approach of all collection system agencies in the state of California about how they manage their system, the basic elements. And they're listed here in the staff report, and I'll touch on it in a minute. One of the requirements is to update the SSMP every 5 years at a minimum, or if there are substantive changes to the sewer system. The last SSMP by the district was in the year 2014. And that's why we had Humphrey Consulting, who used to be the general manager of Steve Sanitary District, which is a cousin right across the Richmond Bridge to us, because they don't have the treatment, they don't run a treatment plant for their collection system like we are. So he's very knowledgeable, and he helped us update our 2014 SSMP. And you can think of it as a structure, a go-to structure. That is, if you want to know, and it's focused around SSO response or preventing SSOs. So if you want to know what our operational procedures are on emergency overflow, overflow emergency response plan is one key element of the SSMP. You can find it in this document. And online we'll have it so that you can click on links that refers to certain reports that were done that are a basis for our decision making, say on the capacity assurance aspect of the SSMP. That is this collection system making the pipes big enough to carry the design flow? And those basic questions. So those are some examples. You know, this is how the fats, oils, and grease program FOG got underway with these SSMPs, that each collection system had to have a program. That led to innovation, and, you know, you're very well aware that CMSA, our treatment plant, goes around our service area collecting grease from grease interceptors and beneficially reusing it in the digesters to create energy that President Borstein talked about, the engines that are put in to turn that into energy back to the grid. That was made possible or spurred on by the requirements for FOG out of the SSMP. So we did update some things. I helped edit a couple things too. I want to credit Stephen Mixis for bringing it home, and he can answer any questions about our emergency response plan. We did put some things in the communications program, just reminding folks about our efforts to use the website, and even more recently social media, trying to get the word out on Nextdoor. So we made a few updates, but this is good timing. I'll just close by saying the update to the statewide permit is going to have more detailed requirements for SSMPs, and they're pretty similar to our IAMP approach. So the things we're doing will probably meet with those requirements, but it's not bad timing to get this done for a pretty good budget, right? It was like less than $20,000. So it was to get it done at this time before the requirements and the budget might be higher to do the update. Meanwhile, we're doing what the spirit of the SSMP envisions. You know, this agency, I believe, is really setting a standard in some of these areas, and appreciate your support in this recommended update. It is a bit of a formality, but the state and the US EPA, they want to see collection system agency elected officials like yourself aware of this process and to have your opportunity to review it and be knowledgeable about it. And so that's the purpose of this hearing tonight. And with that concludes my overview.
You guys are on another agenda item, aren't you? I see 12 something. I was shocked to learn that we have 79% vitrified clay. And at first I was like, that has to include the laterals, right? And then no, I looked at the map and the lines would have to be far more tiny. Wow, is that a problem?
Actually, a lot of it's lined, but
Okay.
it's still classified as vitrified clay pipe. It just has an internal liner. So it is a problem. It's a lot.
I mean, clay pipes is like, one step up from techite, right? In our, oh my gosh. we
Because
can't-
they last and last, it's the joints that are the problem.
Okay.
And the cleaning. That's why we have a strategic cleaning program, because the cleaning, all the nozzles, all the rotters, they break pipe while you clean. So you have to
And
manage and balance the risk.
6 inch, we're talking the diameter, right?
Yes,
Okay.
inside.
It's pretty small.
It is pretty small, and that's 73%. Like most of this system
Do you
is
put
small
in
clay
6-inch
pipes.
pipe now?
Rarely.
Yes, very rarely. One of the main issues also is most of the nation's 8-inch for main lines. California seems to be the one with 6-inch, so we can't buy some of the state-of-the-art technology because it doesn't fit in 6-inch. So there's a lot of issues, but we're tackling them.
Yeah, 6-inch predated the prevalence of grease.
Yes.
Oh.
Great point.
So we get, the grease has really kicked in the last 30, 40 years. And so and then roots and just ongoing maintenance in terms of the aperture that gets closed more easily in a 6-inch than an 8-inch pipe. So anything going forward, we do minimum 8-inch with exceptions, and it turns out, I'll talk about it in board item number 11, an example exception.
Previews of things to come. All right, and anybody have anything else?
I just want to say, Steve Mixis, this is a fabulous report.
Thank you.
It
Very
is
much.
fabulous, because, it's like a really wonderful review. You have maps, you have these areas, so old
Thank you.
people can focus well. No, this was really well put together, so I wanted to tell you that.
Thank you.
All right.
Kelly?
I have no comments, I agree with what Pam said.
Okay.
We need a motion? I move we approve the revised Ross Valley Sanitary District 2019 Sewer System Management Plan.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carried. Motion carries unanimously.
Now the story of the 6-inch pipe, right?
Well, there is,
Pipe.
yeah, yeah. that's
Online.
right. Well, I have to take, since I have the floor for a second here, one of the people I learned engineering from was Ed Newt, and he reminded me in a conversation not long ago that in the mid-20th century, it's a flip, it's the opposite of today. That is, labor was cheap, materials were expensive. That was when this system was really built, in the mid and early 20th century. So if you think about it, materials being expensive means you're going to be thrifty when it comes to pipe size. And so 6-inch got the job done, and you will see in some of the areas where we can literally have trunks that are 6 inches, because it's just like an erector set, or put them together quickly, and you have downstream pipe that's too narrow, and in certain neighborhoods continue to cause problems. But we're upsizing those areas slowly but surely, and we'll have a project this next summer that does that. But that was an interesting insight, I thought, because then today, it's no big deal, what, you need a 20-inch, that doesn't have a big impact on the budget of the capital project, the pipe size. But back then, when this system was built, it probably did. Good, all right, well, so moving on.
Item 11.
Now, when would we put in a 6-inch pipe? I mean, you're dying to know. Well, if you're at the very top of the system and downstream of you is a series of 4-inch pipe.
What?
Yeah, that's where we are.
See that in the
Item
SS.
number 11, to review and determine the need to continue the emergency action adopted in Resolution 1960
Oh, and let's.
for realignment of the slide damaged 9th Summit Sewer onto Summit Road and Francis Avenue in San Anselmo. In this area of the system, the sewer system is 4 inches in diameter, like a lateral, going down Francis Avenue, long enough where putting, and we're at the very top of the system, so putting in an 8-inch sewer that goes into a 4-inch system is just a little bit wrong, in terms of, you could do it, but it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. Plus, in this specific instance where we're replacing a 4-inch sewer with a 6-inch, we're rerouting it into the street from a moving hillside. That's the scope of the effort. And so then we're going to build a manhole and it'll be an existing 4-inch going out and 6-inch going in. But that's the top of the system. There's nothing feeding into it. So it's a very rare exception where it didn't make a lot of sense to put in an 8-inch system for serving currently one home and maybe 2 or 3 in the future. That's the circumstances we're in. We're working cooperatively. Thank you for supporting the determination of emergency action in July. And the law requires if we declare an emergency, we need to come before the board and get a 4/5 vote from the board affirming the emergency and continuing it until we resolve it. Project status. As is shown in the packet, we went out to an informal bid, so we saved time by going directly to contractors. We got 4 responsive bids and recommended and selected the lowest responsive bidder, which was Team Gelati. We signed a contract on September 9th, I believe. And it was higher than the engineer's estimate, but all 4 bids were. And it's a difficult place to work. It's very narrow roads. I'm not sure if you've been up on Summit or Scenic Avenue in San Anselmo. But they're people didn't say, I was like, these are horse trails, right? They said, no, these are goat trails. and more than one person told me that, so that's what I'm telling you. But very narrow roads, very difficult to find parking. And so we began the work on last Thursday, doing sock cutting and potholing to find utilities. Began substantive work this week on Monday and have had some challenges. I want to acknowledge that we put door hangers on all the residences on these only one-way out streets. And so this is, to manage traffic in and out, we have to do now a 15-minute delay minimum. So we're shutting down the whole street where a car cannot get by. And
15 minute delay.
it's very challenging because on Summit Road, there's a long winding road, but then you get up to the top and we have a dozen residences. So it's a challenge for the contractor, challenge for our construction manager, and the town is right there with us. Rachel Calvert is helping out. We're helping them prepare to do a retaining wall after we're done, before the wet season comes in. So the goal is to be done by the end of September and get out of there so this town can finish their retaining wall downstream of where we are. So we're coordinating very closely with the town, and we're trying to solve problems that we've had, and it's an ongoing daily job. But we're underway. And so I request you vote to continue the emergency, and the goal is to come back to you in October and cease the continuation. Well, I'm not sure if I looked at legal counsel in the right terminology.
And the emergency.
And the emergency. Yeah.
All right.
This was an issue, not because really of our system, but because the hill slid down and our system happened to be in it. So we have to fix it first, and then they have to build a retaining wall, so it doesn't have to happen again. It can't happen again.
Yes, and I think we're doing the right thing. We're spending a little extra money, but getting that pipe out of that unstable hillside and putting it in the public right of way in the streets with the town's cooperation, it's the right call. It's not inexpensive, but it will be a situation where we don't have to go back and repair it over and over because the hillside keeps moving.
That's great.
It looks like Gelati front-end loaded it with the size of their mobilization. 30,000 that's right. But they won the bid, so.
Any other questions?
Did you guys think that too? Oh, yeah.
It comes off the page.
Any other questions from the board?
Well, we have to do this.
Yeah.
We got bids, and we have to, if it goes longer, we have to do another.
You need to come back at each
Each
meeting
meeting.
and address it.
One moves that we determine a need to continue the emergency action associated with the realignment of the slide damage, number 9 Summit Sewer onto Summit Road and Francis Avenue, so. And we need to proceed with the project.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Performance metrics monthly report.
I have a question on this. Sure. Which, it's all good, but my question is, the localized pipeliner, 84, is that a record?
I think we got 92 a couple months ago, but that's significant. A contractor generally charges $3,000 to $3,500 a piece, so we're doing it at a tenth of the cost.
How much liner is that? Like it goes out
Generally, it's a sectional liner, anywhere from 4 to 8 feet.
4 to 8 feet?
Yeah.
And it's right on the entrance to the manholes, right?
Anywhere in the entire line.
They send a little,
We're also happy to say that we have now a reinstatement cutter, so that generally costs about $6,000, and we're doing it in-house, which no other contractor in California that I know of is doing. So we're saving a boatload of money, and Manny, the repair crew supervisor, is absolutely phenomenal.
Well, yeah, Manny Vigil came up to me in the office, very excited, about 3 weeks ago. He was saying, we did it, we found a reinstatement, and to translate that for you. And tell me if I'm wrong, but this enables us to go up, after we do a repair liner near a lateral connection, we cover the lateral connection with the liner, right? So we have to reinstate the lateral. Well, this technology, instead of coming through, having to go in somebody's yard and punch it through from their clean out at their house, if they have a clean out.
Yep.
So that, yeah, that's an if. If they don't have a clean out, we can't do it, and then we have to do something else. Now we can go up the main.
That's what the new truck gave us.
Not the new truck.
No.
This is just a new piece
It's a
of
push
technology.
cutter.
Tool.
New what?
It's a little push cutter, pneumatic.
So you go up the main, let's say, I'm imagining an easement sewer, right, between people's backyards and a lateral coming in. That's really our place for us to get in there and dig up and reconnect. So we're moving this push cutter up from a manhole in the street up to easement. And then we turn, remote control turn
Yeah,
towards
it's an
where the
articulated
lateral
head.
comes in. We measured it because we were careful when we stuck the pig up, and we know based on the wire how far to go. We turn, we cut, and we reinstate, and smooth the connection, and do that without digging up somebody's yard or getting in their yard, which is pretty cool. So Manny was excited, I was excited.
Yeah,
The crew was.
Because this is a really useful, non-invasive, it's one of those trenchless stories.
Yeah.
That we're pretty proud of as an organization, that we think we're on the forefront of trenchless.
The number 84 and 92, I don't think I meant, I don't remember that, but 84 is huge.
It is.
92 is better, but all of it's good.
We also have a lot
Standard.
faster curing epoxy. Manny has done a phenomenal research. So instead of a 6-hour cure time, we can get it down to a 1-hour cure time. So our production is heightened dramatically.
2 hours, right?
With the accelerator, yes, 1 to 2 hour depending on heat and
It's like a
heat.
stent.
Yeah.
So, for instance, Union Sand will put in 1-point repair, or Napa Sand will put in 1-point repair. We'll put in anywhere from 4 to 8. And so Manny's actually visiting. We've actually put a point repair in Sonoma Water, and then we're helping out other agencies through our involvement with Bayworks. So our name's getting out. Pretty cool.
This research was real, it was a trial and error, like most research. He was given the freedom to go out and look for, and there were these kits that had both the fiberglass liner and the epoxy that, made it stick like glue. He did the research to find ways to get those separately, for much cheaper, in bulk, instead of in a kit, have it in bulk and get more of it at a cheaper price. And try different epoxy resins, to see which ones work. So it took, this is several years in the making to a system that, we're sharing with other public agencies. And Manny Vigil deserves a lot of credit. I think, giving credit to staff, I don't want to leave you without, I'll mention with the metrics, and I want to hear more questions if you have, but we're going to add recycled water to the metrics. Because we restarted the truck fill station. It was built, or at least refurbished for the drought, and has fallen out of use. It's got cobwebs on it. And so we restarted that. We're going to start reporting how much we use for sewer cleaning, how much we use for dust control at the remediation site. And I want to thank Rafael Zarco, our operations supervisor, for really making that happen on the sewer cleaning side, but also really helping out with getting the contractor at Larkspur Landing, getting the equipment to be fit up. And that also includes staff Dale Olson and Daryl Kroshold, who took a little time out of their days to get the fittings all set up, to make it easy for the contractor to use recycled water, because it wasn't economical really necessarily for them to do it. We really wanted them to do it. Our staff made it happen, and now it's convenient for them, and it's happening. So I want to thank staff for their excellent work.
I have a question on the laterals on page 7. We do the lateral replacements fiscal year to date, so that was last year, I suppose. Is that just ones we did? Do we keep track of when they don't take advantage of our grant program? A lot of people repair their laterals, right, without taking advantage of our grant or loan program. Do we keep a record of that?
We have a record of how many permits have been pulled
Yes.
versus how many lateral grants have been issued, yes.
Yes.
And then if somebody doesn't get a grant, you inspect it, right?
Yes. If they get a permit, we inspect it.
Okay.
I'm surprised that more passed than failed. Can I ask why there was it 16, 13 on that page in front of me, there were 41 that passed, and I think 13 that failed, 16 that were ongoing. Of the 13 that failed, ones that were inspected prior, it's not like they're being repaired and then failing the repair. These are house sales.
They fail and then they have to be re-inspected, so they
What?
have to set up another day.
Re-inspected.
Re-inspected.
Is that somebody who's had work done on the lateral?
Yes.
Or no, or I'm asking, did they do $75,000 worth of work on their house, and or they're selling their house, and so they've had a lateral test and they failed the test? Or is this somebody that had their lateral repaired and
The second
failed?
one,
Second one.
Really?
yeah.
Yeah, so our inspectors will go out with the spec book, the contractor will put in the wrong pipe, but we have a continuous amount of inspections per day, so we just fail them. And then when they have to schedule another date. So,
They
and we have
redo the work and
really
then
good
re-inspect.
inspectors.
Okay.
We do not let them get away with it.
I'm surprised too, you think.
I think they wouldn't fail that much.
I think when we gave them the classification specifications, that they do it according to those, yes, you would think.
Yeah, I thought,
Okay.
since you're gonna inspect it.
Right, since you gave us $250 to give you a permit and come out and inspect it, yes.
I'm sorry, can I ask another question on that? Because it's just, are we tracking which contractors are failing?
Yes, it's
And
all in the CMMS.
are there a number of ones that kind of raise to the top or the bottom, if you will?
Yes.
Can you
Maybe
give
we
out a
should-
score sheet to people that, number of?
So, I mean, we're kind of treading into dangerous territory. They're licensed plumbers. They're
Yeah.
licensed plumbing contractors. And so as long as they continue to be licensed plumbing contractors, we continue to issue them permits. I think what, you might run into are, just like any private company, they might try to cut corners and hope that they can get away with their for-profit, right, corporations or businesses. Maybe some of their staff needs a little bit more training. There's a variety of reasons. Maybe conditions were different. Again, there's underground work. Maybe conditions were different than they thought before they bid the job, and so that they have to make, what they're trying to, get the job done for the price that they quoted. But it's a checks and balances system. I mean, that's why we go out and inspect it.
All right. Okay. That's reality.
It's a messy world.
Yeah, well, and we're a messy world business.
Right.
But it's helpful to track the metrics.
Yeah.
It gives you a picture of.
B is another.
Did you want to add anything to that, Stephen, or was that a pretty good summary of, yeah?
One of the biggest reasons is employee turnover for private
Yeah.
contractors. That has been single number one.
Yeah. Private contractors.
Private, yes.
B,
So we did
operations and maintenance.
Oh, yeah, so this is, the first one was for July, second was for August.
Well, it's just August, okay. Same thing.
What do you do about an odor complaint?
Funny you should mention that.
No, you should mention.
Well, we're kind of figuring it out in some ways, Is it, as I said, is it a single voice or is it a chorus?
Yeah.
In terms of the complaint. You need to consider, and then do we go out and confirm the odor source? And so it's really site specific, circumstance specific. We do send people out, and actually this week, we're concerned that there might be an operational odor impact of having pump station 15 down, as it is right now, as we're putting in the new VFDs as part of that project in Kentfield. So when we got the odor complaint on the weekend, we responded to the citizen and we looked into it thinking it might have been coming through pump station 13 because of the backup system we use. Preliminarily, we determined no, that's not what the source was. And we're doing a little study, so we document it. We'll have a map using our data management system and put in the H2S or the hydrogen sulfide data that we're collecting and all the manholes and other potential odor sources so that we can let the citizens know. We looked into it, and sometimes what people think are a sewer smell is coming from a stagnant storm drain or a ditch, especially this time of year, September. It's dry, lower water tables, low flow systems, algae buildup, and just from the momentum of summer, it's the highest harmful algal bloom risk month of the year, September. So odors go with that, right? So there may be storm drain odors, there may be dead animals, wildlife, roadkill. So, you know, but we confirmed, or we weren't able to confirm a sewer source in that neighborhood. So that's an example, but we will respond.
We investigate.
Yep.
Well, see?
That's,
Any questions?
no,
Comments? How are we doing year to year on the legal?
well, for an HR consultant, I think the first year I was here, we were spending $200,000 a year in HR consulting. We reduced that after a year to $100,000. And then in my, this last year, I think we reduced it to 60,000. And going forward, I think we're at 20,000. And that's just for a little extra, you know, HR support here and there. And that seems to be sufficient.
Legally, we went over budget.
Yeah.
It's down from previous.
Well, August, we shouldn't have seen too much activity because we didn't have a board meeting. So it usually balances out by the end of the year. All right.
This meeting is closed.